"It wasn't me, I swear I didn't kill him." The trembling voice of 75-year-old Mrs. Ilara echoed in the heavy air of the courtroom, but the judge seemed not to hear. All the evidence, every incredulous glance from the jury, and even the confused testimony of 70-year-old Mr. Osvaldo the gardener, pointed to her guilt in her husband's brutal murder. Her heart pounded erratically, cold sweat trickling down her forehead as the judge's gavel hovered, ready to seal her fate. And then, as hope faded, a dark shadow crossed the hall, bringing with it a secret that would defy all logic and justice itself. The shadow suddenly materialized into a raven with lustrous feathers as black as a moonless night. With a powerful caw that tore through the heavy silence of the courtroom, the majestic bird took flight, not in panic, but with an almost human determination, hovering for an instant above the heads of those present. A murmur of astonishment swept through the benches. The judge, her gavel still suspended, widened her eyes, her severe expression replaced by a mix of surprise and irritation. Her thin lips tightened. Ilara, in turn, felt a familiar shiver. It was Corvus, the raven that had visited her garden for years, the same one she fed with pieces of bread and who seemed to understand her most intimate thoughts. Her eyes, previously tearful with despair, now shone with a spark of disbelief. What was he doing here, in such a solemn and oppressive place? Corvus did not linger inside the hall. With steady wing beats, he flew towards the large window, which overlooked the courthouse's outer courtyard, and from there, beyond the walls, to the bustling street. But he did not flee. He landed on the windowsill, turned his head, and fixed his penetrating gaze on Ilara, as if inviting her to follow him, to decipher an enigma. His call became more urgent, a call that seemed to echo directly in the elderly woman's soul, awakening in her a strange feeling that something extraordinary was about to happen. The judge, recovering from the initial shock, tried to regain control. "Silence! Someone remove that bird from here!" Her voice, however, lacked its previous firmness. The guards, hesitant, looked at each other, unsure how to approach such an imposing and seemingly fearless raven. Corvus, ignoring the order, flapped his wings again, flying in a tight circle and returning to the windowsill, this time with a shiny object in his beak. A small piece of metal which he dropped onto the courtroom floor with a soft clink, capturing everyone's attention. The object rolled to the feet of Mr. Osvaldo, the gardener, who was sitting in the front row, still visibly shaken by his own testimony. With trembling hands, he bent down, picked up the small piece of metal, which appeared to be part of an antique brooch, and examined it with curiosity. His eyes met Ilara's, and for a brief moment, a silent connection was established between the two elderly people. A shared memory of tranquil days in the garden. Both knew Corvus. Both shared a piece of that life that now seemed so distant. The raven, as if having completed a stage, flew again, but this time not far. He hovered over the head of the defense lawyer, who sat with his head bowed, desolate, his shoulders slumped under the weight of imminent defeat, and then descended, landing softly on the table in front of the judge. His dark eyes scanned the astonished faces, and he let out a softer caw, almost a lament, before tilting his head towards the window, towards the outside world, towards the horizon. The judge, intrigued despite herself, followed the raven's gaze. Outside, the afternoon sun bathed the courthouse gardens, and beyond them, Ilara's property could be glimpsed in the distance, a place she knew only from the case files. Corvus, like a silent maestro, seemed to be pointing to something specific, something beyond everyone's sight, but which he, with his animal keenness, seemed to know deeply. Ilara felt a lump in her throat. Corvus. He had always been an astute observer, a silent confidant. Could it be that he was there for a reason greater than a mere detour? Hope, which had seemed dead minutes before, began to timidly sprout in her chest. A delicate flower in the desert of uncertainty. The raven cawed once more, a sound that now seemed laden with urgent purpose, and flew out the window, disappearing for an instant, only to reappear, perched on a small angel statue in Ilara's garden, visible in the distance. His eyes were fixed there, and he flapped his wings as if demanding that everyone look at that spot. Judge Helena could not tear her gaze from the raven. The bird, perched on the angel statue in the distance, flapped its wings with almost human insistence. A sepulchral silence fell over the courtroom. Everyone followed the judge's gaze to the statue Corvus seemed to indicate. Ilara, her heart pounding, whispered, "It's Corvus! He's showing us something! Please, Your Honor, look where he's pointing." The defense lawyer, Dr. Almeida, who had seemed resigned, raised his head. His eyes reflected curiosity. He looked at Ilara, the judge, and the garden. It was an absurd situation, but hopelessness was fertile ground for the improbable. "Your Honor," he began, his voice urgent, "this bird's intervention is extraordinary. Ilara and Mr. Osvaldo know this raven." "Perhaps there is something to be investigated," Judge Helena frowned. "A raven as a witness? Absurd." Nevertheless, the bird's insistence, the hope in Ilara's eyes, and the lawyer's plea made her hesitate. She looked at Mr. Osvaldo, who confirmed his familiarity with Corvus with a nod. The judge sighed, feeling the weight of that unusual decision. Justice, sometimes, required looking beyond the obvious. "Very well," said the judge, her voice firm, but with a tone that revealed her reluctance. "Guards, accompany Dr. Almeida, Mr. Osvaldo, and Mrs. Ilara to the indicated location. Verify what the raven is pointing to. We cannot prolong this spectacle." She made a gesture, indicating the temporary suspension of the session, while murmurs spread through the hall. Ilara felt her legs weaken. Her eyes met Mr. Osvaldo's, and a fragile smile appeared on her lips. Corvus had always been a mystery, a silent companion in the garden, but now he was her friend's last hope. With slow steps and renewed determination, the group headed for the exit. The lawyer, clutching his briefcase, seemed to have found new vigor. As they left the courtroom, Corvus was still there, on the angel statue. Seeing the group approach, he cawed and flapped his wings, remaining nearby. The statue, made of white marble and weathered by time, stood in an isolated corner of the garden among rose bushes and shrubs. It was an antique piece that Ilara's husband had insisted on keeping. Mr. Osvaldo, familiar with the garden, was the first to approach the statue. His eyes scanned the base and the pedestal. Ilara, breathless, watched every movement her breath held. The lawyer waited, skeptical yet hopeful. Corvus from above watched with his intelligent eyes. Ilara's heart hammered, the tension palpable. With his fingertips, Mr. Osvaldo began to feel the base of the statue, searching for something hidden. Mr. Osvaldo, with the dexterity of someone who knew every crevice of that garden, slid his wrinkled fingers along the cold base of the statue. His eyes, previously tearful, now showed an almost feverish concentration. He felt the grooves of the marble, the mossy depressions, the small imperfections that time had sculpted. Ilara, beside him, held her breath, her heart beating a frantic rhythm against her ribs. She watched the gardener with an intensity that bordered on supplication, her hands clasped in a gesture of silent prayer. Dr. Almeida, a little further away, maintained an expression of doubt, but curiosity prevented him from looking away. Corvus, from atop the statue, seemed like a vigilant sentinel, his black eyes fixed on the trio, as if anxiously awaiting the outcome of a carefully orchestrated plan. Suddenly, Mr. Osvaldo's fingers stopped. He felt a small, almost imperceptible protrusion, disguised by years of patina and a tangle of ivy. With a delicate effort, he removed the foliage and pressed the spot. A soft click, almost inaudible, resonated in the silence of the garden, and a small hatch, skillfully camouflaged in the statue's base, opened, revealing a dark and damp compartment. Ilara's eyes widened. A glimmer of hope, as fragile as a leaf in the wind, sprouted in her chest. Mr. Osvaldo, with the same slowness and reverence, reached into the compartment. His fingers found a small, rectangular object wrapped in an old, dusty cloth. He carefully removed it, revealing an old, but seemingly intact, voice recorder. Dr. Almeida stepped forward, the skepticism on his face giving way to genuine surprise. "A recorder," he murmured, taking the device from Mr. Osvaldo's trembling hands. He examined the object with the attention of an archaeologist unearthing a precious artifact. Ilara, in turn, felt tears well up. She recognized the recorder. It was her husband's. He used it to record his great ideas, as he called them, or to dictate notes when he didn't want to write. But why would it be there, hidden, and why would Corvus have indicated it? Corvus, as if sensing the tension subside, let out a softer caw, almost a sign of approval, and took flight, circling above their heads before landing on a nearby branch, observing them with an ancestral wisdom. "Ilara, do you recognize this device?" asked Dr. Almeida, his voice now laden with contained hope. "Yes, Dr. Almeida, it's my husband's," she replied, her voice choked with emotion. "He always carried it with him, but I never imagined it would be here." The lawyer, with steady hands, felt the recorder, searching for the play button. "If something is recorded here, it could be the key to the truth. It could be your salvation, Ilara." Their eyes met, and a deep understanding passed between them. That device, so insignificant in itself, now represented the ultimate chance for justice. The guards, who until then had watched with a mix of boredom and disbelief, now seemed more alert. Curiosity had overcome formality. Mr. Osvaldo, exhausted but with a gleam of satisfaction in his eyes, nodded. He had done his part. "We need to return to the courtroom immediately," declared Dr. Almeida, clutching the recorder to his chest. "The judge needs to hear this. Everyone needs to hear it." Ilara felt a renewed strength, a flame rekindling her soul. Justice, which had seemed so distant, was now there, perhaps held within that small device. She looked at Corvus, who seemed to observe her with a look of complicity. The raven, the unlikely messenger, had fulfilled its mission. With firmer steps than before, the group hurried back to the courtroom, carrying not just a dusty recorder, but the promise of a long silenced truth. Hope, finally, had found its way. With firmer steps than before, the group hurried back to the courtroom, carrying not just a dusty recorder, but the promise of a long silenced truth. Hope, finally, had found its way. Ilara felt her heart pound erratically, a mix of dread and contained euphoria. Dr. Almeida, clutching the recorder to his chest, had a renewed sparkle in his eyes, his posture erect, feeling with each step the weight of responsibility and the possibility of redemption. Mr. Osvaldo, exhausted but with a faint smile on his lips, followed them, his eyes fixed on the angel statue in the distance, where Corvus was no longer present, but whose presence still lingered in the air. As they re-entered the courtroom, an even deeper silence than before greeted them. All eyes turned to them, to the recorder in the lawyer's hands, to Ilara's expression, which seemed to have aged and rejuvenated at the same time. Judge Helena, observing them from her bench, maintained a serious expression, but a flicker of curiosity crossed her gaze. She struck the gavel once, a dry sound that broke the silence, but did not dissolve it. "The session will resume," she declared, her voice grave. Dr. Almeida approached the bench, extending the recorder to the judge. "Your Honor, we found this device hidden in the statue indicated by the raven. We believe it contains crucial information for this case." The judge took the recorder with white gloves, examining it with professional skepticism. It was an old model, and dust and time could have damaged its contents. She looked at the court's sound technician, who promptly stepped forward to connect the device to an audio system so everyone could hear. The room was in suspense, every breath held, every heartbeat echoing in the silence. Ilara closed her eyes, a silent prayer on her lips. The technician carefully inserted the batteries and pressed the play button. An initial hiss filled the room, causing some present to sigh in disappointment. But then voices began to emerge, faint at first, then clearer. It was Ilara's husband's voice, loud and angry. "I already told you, Ilara, I'm not changing my mind. This house is mine." Ilara's voice, softer but laden with anguish, replied, "Please, dear, don't do this. Think of everything we built together." The argument escalated. Her husband's tone became more aggressive, and the sound of something being knocked over could be heard. "You don't understand. I decide. Get out of my way." Then, a sound of struggle, a muffled cry from Ilara, followed by a dry, heavy thud. Her voice, now in a panic, echoed, "No, darling, no, help me. Someone help me. He fell. My God, he fell." The sound of the recording ceased abruptly, leaving a deafening silence in the courtroom. The thud, Ilara's desperate cry, the plea for help. Everything was clear. There was no murder, just a tragic accident, a woman trying to restrain her husband in a fit of rage. Tears streamed down Ilara's face, but they were no longer tears of despair, but of overwhelming relief. Dr. Almeida, with tear-filled eyes, looked at the judge, who was pale, her lips slightly parted. Mr. Osvaldo, beside Ilara, held her hand, a gesture of silent support. Judge Helena took a deep breath, regaining her composure. In light of this unquestionable evidence, this court declares Ilara innocent. Her voice, once firm, now trembled slightly, laden with emotion. The case is closed. A murmur of astonishment and relief swept through the hall, followed by timid applause that soon turned into an ovation. Ilara felt a weight of years lifted from her shoulders. Justice, guided by an unlikely messenger, had prevailed. The ovation in the courtroom swelled, a sea of voices and applause embracing Ilara, enveloping her in a warmth she hadn't felt in a long time. Her knees buckled, and she would have fallen had it not been for Mr. Osvaldo's steady arm, which gently supported her. Tears, which had once been of anguish, now flowed freely, washing away the pain and fear that had oppressed her for months. She looked at Mr. Osvaldo, her blue eyes, once clouded, now shining with immense gratitude. He smiled back, a tired but sincere smile, a silent testament to a friendship that had weathered the storm. Dr. Almeida, the defense lawyer, approached, his face illuminated by a victory that transcended the professional. He squeezed Ilara's hand with a strength that conveyed respect and admiration. "Ilara," he said, his voice choked, "you are free. The truth, finally, has come to light." She merely nodded, unable to utter a word, but the squeeze of her hand and the look in her eyes said it all. That man, who seemed to have exhausted all hope, had risen with her, fighting until his last breath. Judge Helena, from her bench, observed the scene with contained emotion. Her eyes swept over Ilara, Mr. Osvaldo, and Dr. Almeida. The formality of her position could not hide the humanity that deeply touched her. She had witnessed something rare, an intervention that defied logic, but which, undeniably, had revealed justice. With a discreet nod, she indicated to the guards to allow Ilara to be escorted out of the courtroom, not as a defendant, but as an exonerated, reborn woman. As Ilara was guided out, the murmurs of the crowd transformed into words of solidarity. Some women, with tears in their eyes, reached out to touch her, offering silent comfort. She felt the human connection, the empathy that sprang from the understanding of her pain. It was a reminder that even in the darkest moments, kindness and compassion could emerge. Outside, The sunlight seemed brighter, the air lighter. Ilara took a deep breath, smelling the flowers in the courthouse garden. Her eyes instinctively turned to the angel statue where Corvus had perched. He was not there now, but his presence was felt, an echo of his miraculous intervention. That raven, which she fed in her garden, had become her guardian, her messenger of truth. Mr. Osvaldo, beside her, pointed to the sky. "He's there, Ilara, watching." She followed his gaze and saw a dark silhouette flying majestically in the blue, disappearing into the horizon. A genuine smile, the first in a long time, bloomed on her wrinkled lips. Overcoming was not just about being exonerated, it was about rediscovering faith, hope, and the beauty of life, even after pain. Dr. Almeida approached again with a look of concern. "Ilara, we need to talk about the next steps. There's much to be done." She nodded, knowing that the path ahead would be challenging, but she was no longer alone. She had the support of friends, the memory of a miracle, and the certainty that truth, however hidden, would always find a way to come to light. Life, with its complexities and unexpected blessings, awaited her. She was ready to start anew, with a lighter heart and a renewed soul. Her home garden, with its memories and secrets, awaited her, now under a new light. Her home garden, with its memories and secrets, awaited her, now under a new light. Ilara felt the fresh afternoon air caress her face as Dr. Almeida's car drove her home. Beside her, Mr. Osvaldo gently held her hand, a silent support worth more than 1,000 words. The feeling of freedom was intoxicating, almost painful, like an atrophied muscle being used again. But behind the relief, a subtle shadow lingered, the return to the house that for so long had been the stage of her pain and now of her innocence. As they passed through the wrought iron gates, Ilara's heart tightened. The mansion, imposing and silent, seemed to watch them. The rose bushes, which Mr. Osvaldo cared for so tenderly, were in full bloom, a vibrant contrast to the pallor of her own emotions. Corvus was not visible, but she felt his presence, an invisible guardian who had changed the course of her life. Dr. Almeida opened the door for her, and Ilara hesitated for a moment before taking the first step into her home, which now seemed strangely new and old at the same time. The silence inside the house was different from the oppressive silence of the courtroom. It was a breathing silence, laden with memories. She walked through the living room, her fingers brushing the dusty furniture, each object an echo of a life she thought she had lost. Mr. Osvaldo and Dr. Almeida accompanied her, respecting her space, but ready for any need. Upon reaching her husband's old study, a place she had avoided for years, Ilara felt an inexplicable urge to enter. The heavy, dark oak desk was covered with papers. Among them, a cream-colored envelope, sealed with an unknown crest, caught her attention. With slightly trembling hands, she picked up the envelope. The handwriting on the sender's address was elegant and formal. Sterling and Blackwood Law Firm. Ilara's heart skipped a beat. She carefully opened the envelope, revealing a letter dated a week prior. Her eyes scanned the lines, and the expression on her face changed from curiosity to a chilling shock. The letter informed her of a complex lawsuit, filed by distant relatives of her husband, questioning the validity of the will and the ownership of the house itself, alleging that the deceased had incurred substantial debts and made obscure agreements that compromised the family's assets. Ilara felt the ground disappear beneath her feet. Her newly won freedom seemed to vanish, replaced by a new battle. She handed the letter to Dr. Almeida, who read it with growing seriousness. Mr. Osvaldo, sensing the change in atmosphere, placed a hand on her shoulder. "What happened, Ilara?" Her voice came out weak, but with a determination that surprised even herself. "It seems truth has many chapters, my dear Osvaldo. My husband, he had more secrets than I imagined." Dr. Almeida sighed, his expression grave. This is a new challenge, Ilara, but it's not one you'll face alone. She looked at him, then at Mr. Osvaldo. That raven, Corvus, had not only freed her from an unjust accusation, but had also guided her to the next stage of her journey, to unravel the deeper layers of a life she thought she knew. Overcoming was not a destination, but a path, and she was ready to walk it, with renewed faith and the certainty that justice, in one way or another, would always find its way. The letter in Dr. Almeida's hands seemed to vibrate with an energy of its own, a new challenge on the horizon of Ilara's newly won peace. The lawyer, his brow furrowed, reread the lines, his eyes scanning the complex legal terms that spoke of mortgages, collateral, and obscure clauses. "Ilara, this is serious," he began, his voice lower, laden with concern. "Your husband's relatives are contesting the will, alleging significant debts against the property, perhaps even with liens on the house itself. They seek the annulment of the will and possession of the assets to cover these supposed debts, which could leave you with nothing." Ilara felt a chill down her spine, more intense than the cold air of the courtroom. The joy of innocence was corroded by this new threat. "But how? My husband never told me about such large debts. He was always so reserved with finances, but I never imagined anything like this." Her voice was a thread, barely audible, and her eyes, previously tearful with relief, now reflected new anguish. Mr. Osvaldo squeezed her hand, a gesture of unwavering comfort. "Don't worry, Ilara. We will uncover the truth, just as we did before. You are not alone in this fight," he said, his voice hoarse but firm, a pillar of support. "Doctor," Almeida nodded, carefully putting the letter away. "We will need time to investigate, Ilara. This firm, Sterling and Blackwood is known for its aggressiveness. We will have to delve deep into your husband's financial records, understand the extent and validity of these allegations. It's possible he made agreements without your knowledge, perhaps without proper legal registration, which would render them invalid." He sighed, running a hand through his grey hair. "It will be a different legal battle, Ilara, one that will require patience and much research, but no less arduous." Ilara looked around the study with different eyes, as if the walls whispered her husband's secrets, the shelves filled with old books, the imposing desk, the art objects. Each seemed to hide a part of a greater truth. How many more secrets were hidden there? The image of Corvus, the raven, came to her mind, a beacon of hope. He had guided her once. Could he continue to do so, even if only in spirit? "Dr. Almeida, what does obscure agreements mean?" she asked, her voice gaining a tone of determination. "He was a businessman, yes, but obscure. That sounds dishonest." The lawyer hesitated, choosing his words. "It means they might not have been transparent, Ilara. Agreements that could involve questionable practices, perhaps even illegal ones, or that wouldn't comply with financial regulations. We need to check for documents, contracts, anything that might shed light on this before these relatives proceed with the lawsuit." He pointed to the pile of papers on the desk. "Where we start is right here. We need to examine every document, bank record, every piece of correspondence." Osvaldo, with the wisdom of someone who had observed the house for decades, suggested with a gleam in his eyes, "Ilara, your husband had a safe in the master bedroom, a large iron safe. Perhaps they will find something too important to leave out in the open." Ilara's eyes widened. The safe. She had completely forgotten its existence, a heavy, old object that her husband rarely opened in her presence, always with an aura of mystery. The memory brought a chill, but also a glimmer of hope. "Yes, the safe. I have the key. It's kept in a small jewelry box." Hope, which seemed to have dwindled under the weight of the new threat, rekindled, fragile but present, like an ember under ashes. Dr. Almeida felt a new surge of energy. "Excellent! This could be a good start, Ilara. But remember, the truth can be painful and uncomfortable. We will need courage to face it." She nodded, looking at Mr. Osvaldo, then at Dr. Almeida. The human connection, the unwavering support of her friends was her greatest strength. Justice was not just about what happened in court, but about the relentless pursuit of truth, however uncomfortable it might be. Overcoming was not a single event, but a continuous journey of discovery and resilience. And she was ready for the next stage, guided by faith and the certainty that, just as Corvus had revealed the first secret, others would also come to light, unraveling the deeper layers of her husband's life and consequently her own, which was now being rewritten. Ilara, with the safe key heavy in her hand, felt a mix of apprehension and a strange courage. The certainty that truth, however uncomfortable, would always find its way was a balm to her soul. Guided by Dr. Almeida and Mr. Osvaldo, she ascended the stairs leading to the master bedroom, a room she rarely visited after her husband's death. Each step was a stride towards a past she thought she knew, but which now revealed itself to be full of shadows. The room was immersed in a melancholic silence, the heavy curtains blocking most of the afternoon light. In the corner, almost camouflaged by the darkness and an old rug, stood the iron safe, a grey monolith that seemed to guard not just documents, but years of secrets. Ilara approached, her fingers brushing the cold, rough surface. Dr. Almeida turned on the light, revealing the complexity of the lock. "Are you sure you want to do this now, Ilara?" asked Dr. Almeida, his voice soft, noticing her hesitation. "We can wait, if you prefer." She took a deep breath, her eyes fixed on the safe. "No, Dr. Almeida, I can't run anymore. Corvus showed me that truth is liberating, even when it hurts. I need to know." Her voice, though slightly trembling, carried an unwavering resolve. Mr. Osvaldo, with a supportive look, placed a hand on her shoulder. "We are here with you, Ilara." With the key in hand, Ilara inserted it into the lock. The mechanism groaned, a dry metallic sound that echoed in the silence of the room like an ancient sigh. She turned the key carefully, feeling the resistance of the metal. A final click, and the heavy safe door swung open, revealing a dark and cluttered interior. The smell of aged paper and mold filled the air. Inside, there were piles of documents, yellowed folders, and some personal objects she didn't immediately recognize. Dr. Almeida, wearing white gloves, began to remove the items with the delicacy of an archaeologist. There were accounting ledgers with tiny handwriting, contracts with seals and signatures she had never seen, and a small, dark wooden box. "It seems your husband was more organized than you imagined, Ilara," commented Dr. Almeida, trying to ease the tension. Ilara merely nodded, her eyes fixed on the wooden box. There was something about it that drew her, an intuition. "What's in that box?" she asked, her voice almost a whisper. The lawyer opened the box. Inside, there was a small, leather-bound diary and a faded photograph. The photo showed her husband, much younger, beside a woman who was not her, and a small child. Ilara's heart tightened, a pang of pain mixed with surprise. "My God," she murmured, picking up the photograph with trembling hands. The woman had a gentle smile, and the child, a boy, seemed to have her husband's eyes. Dr. Almeida, realizing the depth of the revelation, placed the diary in Ilara's hands. "This diary may hold the answers, Ilara. It appears to be his handwriting." She opened the diary, the yellowed pages revealing intimate and at times tormented writing. The first line spoke of a lost love, of a son he could never publicly acknowledge due to family and social pressures, and of debts incurred to secretly support this other family. With each word, the image of her husband, the man she thought she knew, crumbled and rebuilt itself in a complex and painful way. The great ideas and obscure agreements now took on a new and tragic meaning. He was not just a ruthless businessman, he was a divided man, caught between the facade of his public life and the secrets that consumed him. Ilara felt a wave of compassion and sadness overcoming her initial anger. He too was a victim of his own choices and circumstances. The truth was a heavy burden, but also a liberation. She looked at Mr. Osvaldo, then at Dr. Almeida, her eyes tearful but firm. "He had another family," she said, her voice choked but clear. "And it seems he tried to protect them, even if it meant hiding the truth from me and everyone." Overcoming, she realized, was not just about her own innocence, but about the ability to understand human complexity, to forgive and to move forward, even in the face of the most difficult revelations. The path ahead would be long, but she was not alone. Ilara, with her husband's diary in her hands, felt the weight of a life of secrets. The faded photograph, with a smile she had never seen directed at herself, rested on the yellowed pages. Tears streamed not from anger but from deep sadness. Dr. Almeida, sensing the intensity, sat down. Mr. Osvaldo, without words, squeezed her shoulder, offering human warmth. He loved," Ilara whispered, her voice choked, pointing to the lines that described the boy's birth, the secret joy, the pain of the impossibility of a public life. "He was trapped, Dr. Almeida, between duty and love, facade and truth." Her husband's handwriting revealed the torment of his choices, the financial sacrifices to protect his son and mother well, the obscure agreements that were attempts to shield them. Dr. Almeida took the diary. "Ilara, here is the key to the debts. He mentions hefty loans, mortgages and stock sales to keep the other family safe, away from the critical eyes of his own family." He paused, gravely. "This changes everything. The relatives contesting the will probably don't know about this other family. If they did, their motivation would be different, or they might unite with this woman and child." Mr. Osvaldo shook his head. "Poor man, living with so many secrets must have been a heavy burden. And you, Ilara, always so loyal, knowing nothing." Ilara took a deep breath, wiping away her tears. The image of Corvus came to her mind. He had guided her to the truth, not only for her innocence, but for the complexity of her husband's life. Justice, she understood, was the totality of the story and the hidden motivations. "We need to find them, Dr. Almeida," she said, her voice gaining firmness. "This woman and this child. They are part of my husband's truth. If he sacrificed so much, I can continue his legacy and ensure they are not harmed by the debts." Dr. Almeida looked at her with admiration. "It's a noble attitude, Ilara, but it will be a challenge. The diary doesn't reveal names or addresses, only nicknames and veiled references. The investigation will require discretion so as not to alert the relatives." He pointed to a page where her husband mentioned a small cottage in the mountain region near the hydrangeas, a possible starting point. He also speaks of a bank with a separate account for their expenses. Overcoming for Ilara now took a different form. It was not just about freeing herself from an accusation, but about unraveling a painful past, embracing compassion, and reaching out to those who were part of her story. The human connection with Osvaldo and Dr. Almeida expanded, including a family she didn't even know. She felt a renewed strength, a determination that surprised her. "So we'll start with the mountain region and the bank," Ilara declared, closing the diary. "Truth, however much it hides, always finds a way, and I am ready to help it come to light for everyone involved." Her eyes, once full of anguish, now shone with resilient hope, a testament that, even in the ruins of a life, new foundations of altruism and justice could emerge. The path would be arduous, but she was not alone. The memory of Corvus, messenger of truth, propelled her. The journey to unravel the last layers of Ilara's husband's secrets began with a quietness laden with purpose. In the study, Dr. Almeida, with the diary carefully open on the table, delved into the notes, his glasses slipping slightly down his nose as he deciphered the tiny handwriting. Ilara, seated in the worn leather armchair, watched him with her hands clasped in her lap, her gaze distant but focused. Beside her, Mr. Osvaldo, standing, maintained a protective posture, his arms crossed, his expression grave. The lawyer explained that the search for the cottage in the mountain region would require almost invisible discretion, so that the deceased husband's distant relatives, who were still awaiting the lawsuit, would not be alerted to the existence of Lucia and the boy. He promised to initiate bank investigations immediately, searching for the separate account mentioned in the diary, which would be the key to their location. In the days that followed, the house, once a refuge of silence and pain, transformed into a center of discreet activity. Dr. Almeida's phone rang frequently, and his voice, always low and professional, filled the rooms, unraveling the complex web of financial transactions. Ilara, in turn, felt a strange mix of purpose and melancholy. With each new piece of information about the other family, a layer of her husband's image peeled away, revealing a man more complex and tormented than she had ever imagined. She reviewed the diary pages, her wrinkled fingers brushing the yellowed leaves, seeking not just clues, but a deeper understanding of the gestures and choices that shaped his life. Mr. Osvaldo, with his sharp memory and knowledge of the region, became an invaluable ally in the search for the cottage. The mountain region is vast, Ilara, but near the hydrangeas is a good clue, he mused, his blue eyes scrutinizing an old map of the region that he had unfolded on the kitchen table. He remembered a small village, a little off the main routes, where hydrangeas were cultivated in abundance, a place his employer occasionally visited, always with vague excuses about business in the neighboring town. The memory, once insignificant, now gained a new and painful meaning, like pieces of a puzzle finally fitting together. Ilara felt a tightness in her chest, a pang of sadness. The idea that her husband had maintained such a secret life, so close and yet so distant from her, was overwhelming. But compassion, a feeling she rediscovered each day, overcame the hurt. She imagined Lucia, perhaps as lonely as herself, and the boy, growing up without public acknowledgement from his father. Justice, for her, was not just about the law or the court, but about the complete truth and the dignity of everyone involved. A week after the diary's discovery, Dr. Almeida brought news. He entered the study with a contained smile, holding some papers. "I found the account, Ilara. A joint account, in your husband's name and a lady named Lucia Mendez. The statements show regular payments for a property in the mountain region, exactly in the area Mr. Osvaldo mentioned." He extended a document, his eyes fixed on hers, conveying the seriousness of the discovery. "It seems we're on the right track." Ilara felt her heart quicken, a mix of anxiety and relief. Lucia Mendez, a name finally. The truth was materializing, taking shape, ceasing to be just a secret to become a real person. The next step would be to find them. The prospect was daunting, but also laden with a strange hope. How would she approach Lucia? How would she explain the complexity of everything that had happened? Overcoming, she realized, was not just an act of courage, but also of delicacy and deep empathy. Mr. Osvaldo, upon hearing the name, frowned, a deep furrow appearing between his eyebrows. "Lucia Mendez. The name isn't unfamiliar to me, Ilara. I think I saw her a few times in town, many years ago, always very discreet. She had a look, gentle, but a little sad." The gardener's description painted a picture of a woman who, like Ilara, seemed to carry her own silent burdens. "Doctor, Almeida suggested a cautious approach. We need to go there, Ilara, but with the utmost sensitivity. We can't just show up and dump all this information at once. Their lives will also be turned upside down by this revelation. He looked at her, realizing the depth of her decision and the weight she carried. Are you truly ready for this? Ilara nodded slowly, her eyes fixed on the window, where a solitary raven perched on the highest branch of an oak tree, observing her with its peculiar intelligence. I am ready, Dr. Almeida. Truth, however much it hurts, is the only path to peace. And Corvus taught me that sometimes justice requires us to look beyond what our eyes can see, into the hearts and stories that hide. The human connection she now felt extended to this unknown family, a bond forged by the complexity of love and secrecy. She knew the journey would be emotionally exhausting, but the promise of bringing light to a hidden life, of honoring her husband's memory in an unexpected way, and of securing a future for those he tried to protect, was her new and urgent mission. Overcoming was a continuous process, and she was ready to embrace each stage with the unwavering faith that compassion could heal the deepest wounds and bring a new dawn. The journey to the mountain region began the next morning, under a sky that did not shake Ilara's determination. Dr. Almeida drove, Mr. Osvaldo navigated. Ilara, in the back seat, watched the landscape transform, feeling both anxiety and peace. With each kilometer, she drew closer to the truth of her husband and herself. We're almost there, announced Mr. Osvaldo, pointing to a trail. The car swayed. A clearing opened up, revealing a simple but cozy wooden cottage nestled among trees and hydrangeas. Smoke rose from the chimney. Dr. Almeida parked the car. The silence was filled with birdsong. Ilara felt her heart beat faster, her fingers clutching her dress. It's here, she whispered. Mr. Osvaldo got out, his gaze conveying support. With hesitant steps, the three approached the door. Before they could knock, it opened. A brown-haired woman with melancholic eyes appeared, Lucia Mendes. Beside her, a boy of about 10, with the same curious eyes and face shape Ilara had recognized in the photograph, peeked from behind his mother's skirt. Lucia looked at them with surprise and apprehension. "Can I help you?" she asked, pulling the boy behind her. Ilara took a step forward, her hands extended. "Lucia Mendes. My name is Ilara. I am husband's name's wife." The mention of the name made Lucia's eyes widen, and a pallor spread across her face. The boy squeezed his mother's hand. Dr. Almeida intervened. "Mrs. Mendes, this visit is unexpected. We come in peace with important information for you and your son." He gestured towards the cottage. "Could we talk inside?" Lucia hesitated, her eyes alternating between the strangers and the boy. The distrust was palpable, but Ilara's kindness, the lawyer's respectful demeanor, and Mr. Osvaldo's presence made her yield. She opened the door wider. Inside, the cottage was simple but clean and cozy. The smell of coffee lingered. The boy, still shy, hid behind his mother. Ilara sat on the sofa, feeling the weight. "Lucia," she began, her voice choked, "I discovered the truth about my husband and you, and your son." She took the diary that Dr. Almeida had handed her, her hands trembling. He loved them, and he tried to protect them, even if it meant living a life of secrets and debts. Lucia brought her hands to her mouth, her eyes welling up. Tears streamed down, not from sadness, but from relief, pain, and belated understanding. The boy hugged his mother's legs, sensing the tension in the air, but also a strange softness radiating from Ilara. The elderly woman, with the diary still trembling in her hands, felt her own heart calm, an unexpected peace replacing the anguish that had accompanied her for so long. She extended her hand to Lucia, a gesture of pure compassion. "I understand, Lucia," Ilara said, her voice soft and choked. "He lived a life of sacrifices, trying to protect you. I also knew nothing until Corvus guided me to the truth. He showed me that justice is not just about what is seen, but about what is felt, about the stories that hide." She explained to Lucia about the Raven, about the discovery of the recorder, about the recording that exonerated her, and finally, about the diary that revealed their existence. Lucia listened, her eyes fixed on Ilara, each word unraveling years of mystery and solitude. She, in turn, shared the pain of a forbidden love, the secret joy of having a child with the man she loved, and the burden of living in the shadows, always worried about an uncertain future. Dr. Almeida, sensing the connection forming between the two women, intervened with the necessary practicality. "Lucia, your husband's diary is proof that he not only loved you, but also made provisions for you. The debts he incurred were to ensure your well-being. The relatives contesting the will do not know of your existence, and this information is crucial. We can use the diary and bank statements to protect your son's future and ensure he receives what is rightfully his." He explained a detailed plan to renegotiate the debts, secure the assets intended for Lucia and the boy, and if necessary, confront the relatives with the truth, but always with the utmost discretion to preserve everyone's dignity. Mr. Osvaldo, who had been observing everything attentively, nodded. "Truth always finds a way, doesn't it, Ilara? And the Raven?" He knew. He always knew. His voice, laden with wisdom and support, reinforced the idea that justice at times manifests in unexpected ways, guided by a greater force. Ilara felt a wave of relief and gratitude. Overcoming was not just hers, but everyone's there. Lucia, with her son in her arms, looked at Ilara, and a smile, though fragile, appeared on her lips. I don't know how to thank you. I always wanted my son to have his father's recognition, but I never knew how. Living in hiding was so difficult." Ilara squeezed Lucia's hand. "There's nothing to thank me for. We are family now, Lucia. A family united by truth and the love of a complex man. Together we will honor his memory and ensure your son has the future he deserves." The human connection, previously fragmented by secrets, now solidified, transcending pain and paving the way for a new form of family. The boy, sensing the change in atmosphere, let go of his mother and looked at Ilara with less fearful curiosity. In that cozy cottage, under Dr. Almeida's watchful eye and Mr. Osvaldo's silent support, the foundations of a new beginning were laid. The resolution of conflicts, once insurmountable, began to take shape, not through cold law, but through compassion and altruism. Ilara, the 75-year-old woman who had faced the defendant's bench, found her true freedom not only in innocence, but in the ability to embrace the totality of her husband's life, to forgive, and to reach out to those he loved in secret. Justice, she understood, was the complete truth, revealed by a raven and sealed by the strength of human connection. The boy, with his curious and less fearful eyes, approached Ilara, extending a small hand. Ilara, moved, held it tenderly. "What's your name, my dear?" she asked, her voice soft. "Daniel," he replied, a timid whisper. Lucia, observing the scene, felt a wave of gratitude. "Daniel always wanted to know his father, but I didn't know how to explain. Now he has a part of his father and a new family." The two women looked at each other, a deep understanding sealing their connection. Dr. Almeida, sensing the moment, cleared his throat. "With your permission, we will begin our work. The diary and bank statements are irrefutable evidence. We will present Daniel and Lucia's case to ensure that the assets intended for them are preserved and the debts renegotiated." He explained that the strategy would be to present the truth to the deceased husband's relatives, not as a weapon, but as an undeniable fact. Discretion will be our greatest ally to avoid scandals and protect everyone's reputation, especially Daniel's. In the months that followed, Dr. Almeida's office became a meeting point for this new family. Ilara and Lucia, once strangers, built a friendship based on mutual understanding and love for the same complex man. Daniel, little by little, began to open up, finding in Ilara a loving grandmother and in Mr. Osvaldo a friend for his garden games. The revelation to the relatives was delicate, but effective. Faced with the irrefutable evidence of the diary and bank documents and the dignified demeanor of Ilara and Lucia, initial resistance gave way to reluctant acceptance, and later to a deeper understanding. The inheritance was redistributed, ensuring Daniel the future his father had secretly planned. The debts were renegotiated, alleviating the burden that weighed on Ilara's husband's memory. Ilara, now free from the accusation and the weight of secrets, felt a peace she never imagined possible. She visited Lucia and Daniel frequently at the cottage, and they, in turn, spent weekends at the old house, which now seemed fuller of life and laughter. Mr. Osvaldo, with his wise smile, observed the transformation. The raven knew Ilara. He showed us that truth, however hidden, always finds a way, and that love has many forms and can unite even the most improbable families. The image of Corvus, the majestic raven that had burst into the courtroom, remained vivid in everyone's memory. For Ilara, he was more than an animal. He was a messenger of divine justice, a constant reminder that compassion and altruism could unravel the deepest mysteries and heal the oldest wounds. She had learned that overcoming was not just about facing adversity, but about the ability to forgive, to understand human complexity, and to reach out, transforming pain into a new beginning. On a sunny day, Ilara, sitting in her garden, watched Daniel play with Mr. Osvaldo. Lucia was beside her, sewing. A raven landed on the oak branch, observing them. Ilara smiled, feeling the warmth of the sun and of love. Life, she thought, was a mosaic of moments, of joys and sorrows, of secrets and revelations. But, in the end, it was human connection, kindness, and the relentless pursuit of truth that gave meaning to everything. Her story, which began with an unjust accusation, culminated in an expanded family, a legacy of compassion, and the certainty that the light of justice and love always prevails. Ilara's life, once marked by loneliness and pain, blossomed in a garden of hope, where every hydrangea whispered stories of overcoming and of a love that, in unexpected ways, had found its true home. That home now was a refuge of laughter and sharing. Ilara, sitting on the porch, watched Daniel run through the garden, his dark hair swaying in the wind as he tried to catch a butterfly. Lucia, beside her, peeled vegetables for lunch, a serene smile on her lips, the melancholy of yesteryear replaced by peace. Mr. Osvaldo, with patience, taught Daniel to identify the birds in the oak tree, pointing to the raven that, faithfully, perched on the highest branch, a silent guardian. Daniel's presence filled the house with an energy Ilara hadn't known was missing. His incessant questions, genuine curiosity, and tight hug at the end of the day were balm for the elderly woman's soul. Lucia, in turn, brought new companionship, sharing stories, laughter, and at times silent tears about the man who united them. Ilara felt that, instead of losing, she had gained a family, an unexpected gift that life had offered her after tribulation. Dr. Almeida remained an essential figure, visiting them regularly to ensure legal matters were in order. He had become more than a lawyer. He was a friend, a confidant who had witnessed Ilara's transformation and the formation of that singular family. During a visit, he commented, with a sparkle in his eyes, It's impressive how truth, when it finally comes to light, has the power to heal and build something so beautiful. You, Ilara, are a living example of overcoming." Ilara merely smiled, holding Lucia's hand. "It wasn't just me, Dr. Almeida. It was Lucia's courage, Mr. Osvaldo's wisdom, Daniel's innocence, and of course Corvus's persistence. Justice, for me, became synonymous with compassion and human connection." She looked at the raven in the oak tree, feeling profound gratitude. The bird, which had once been a harbinger of mystery and tension, was now a symbol of hope and love that transcended human understanding. The days unfolded into a harmonious routine. The hydrangeas in Ilara's garden bloomed with renewed vibrancy, reflecting the new life blossoming there. Lucia, with Ilara's support, began teaching craft classes in the village, finding purpose and a welcoming community. Daniel, growing strong and happy, had the love of two mothers and the wisdom of a surrogate grandfather, Mr. Osvaldo, who taught him about nature and the importance of being kind. At 75, Ilara felt more alive. The weight of the accusation, the pain of her husband's secrets, everything had transformed into resilient strength. She spent hours telling stories to Daniel, reading books, and teaching him to care for plants. The house, once silent, echoed with laughter and conversations, a testament that love, in its various forms, always finds a way to flourish. Overcoming was not a single event, but a continuous process of embracing complex life. Ilara had learned to forgive, understand, and love in a broader and more inclusive way. The human connection she had built was a legacy, a garden of souls intertwined by truth and compassion. And Corvus, the majestic raven, remained as a link between the visible and the invisible, a reminder that justice and love, at times, manifest in the most unexpected places, guiding us towards the light. Life continued, light and full of meaning, a hymn to the resilience of the human spirit and the beauty of second chances.